Hey guys, my name is Colson Rosa, and welcome back to Seraphim Stories. So today I want to talk about Climax. More specifically, I'm talking about the second third of the book, that is the Climax section. Now, the Climax, more specifically, can be the most important moment of the entire story. The moment usually with the largest action or the highest stakes, the point where you cannot return from it. And I will be talking more specifically about that moment. That being said, I'm including the climax as a larger portion of the entire narrative, just to talk about the 3-act structure. So sometimes when I'm talking about climax, I'll be talking about not only that moment itself, but everything leading up to it, and then everything after that defining moment, from which there can be no turning back. Then it will be the resolution section of the story. So I wanted to make that clear because some people think the resolution is just the very end of the story. Some people think the climax is just one particular scene. And some people think that the building up is just the very beginning, the very first 2 chapters. And that's not necessarily the case, because that would leave a lot of the story kind of left in limbo with no description on how it needs to be written in this 3-act structure. So to talk about what the climax needs to do for your story, I first want to talk about mounting action. Though the climax is a specific moment, this section of the story includes much of the influential struggles that take place building toward that final moment. Now, of course, as I mentioned in the building up phase, some of those struggles begin during that first third. The climax does not have a monopoly on every moment of struggle before that final defining moment. And I think it can be sometimes hard to tell where the building up phase ends and where the climax phase begins, because they both are leading up in the action toward that final battle. Whether it's an emotional battle, spiritual battle, physical or situational battle, there is a final battle coming. And I think one way that might make it a little bit easier is whenever you see a raise in the stakes. So the stakes are already high at the beginning of the novel, but usually in a story there comes a point after some of the original trials and challenges that the characters realize they need to step up, or the problem has gotten much worse, or there needs to be a change of course or a change of action. This is typically what I would define then as the end of the building up phase and the start of the climax phase. And this mounting action that takes place then encourages the reader to keep moving, keep seeing how many challenges are going to be faced until it's all resolved. One action builds upon another. One character struggle or character flaw builds upon another. The characters may grow closer together or may grow farther apart as they progress on this journey. And this brings me to my second point, which is the mountains and the valleys. There is not one without the other. Within this mounting action section, even in the darkest stories, glimmers of hope always remain. At the same point in time, even in some of the happiest stories, some of those valley lows need to occur, because not only are they realistic to life and the struggles we face, but they also allow us to care so much more deeply for characters that have to go through real life problems and pains. And they just quite honestly make the story more interesting, because we don't want a story where everything's just perfect from the beginning and a problem is resolved way too easily. So there's going to be highs and lows for the characters. They don't necessarily need to follow another. It doesn't always need to be high and then low and then high and then low. There can be multiple successes followed by multiple errors, but they both need to occur. And you don't want to have too long of a stretch of just one. If you have too long of a stretch of just perfect victories, it's going to feel like the tension is lost and the problem is forgotten. If you have too long of a stretch of just failure after failure, some of those successes are going to feel less realistic unless there's a proper introduction to how they were then won. And also you want to be careful during those low points not to depress your reader unless very specifically that is the tone and style you are going for. Some very specific novels want to, in stressing a particular point or ideology, have very long sections of happiness or very long sections of despair within the climax section of your story. But almost always this should be avoided because of the things I previously mentioned. Unless you're trying to show, for example, maybe a character's fall into madness, or characters thinking they have such a perfect life and they finally achieved their perfect life, and then boom, they suddenly start to realize that everything that they thought was perfect, they thought the problem was resolved, it's definitely not, and because of their arrogance it's become so much worse. So the third thing you need to talk about in your climax is palpable tension. You need to have tension that can be felt, that can be real and vivid, not problems that are kind of flippant or easy to solve. There's no real stakes, there's no real danger. That's not what you want. You want your reader and you want the characters to come face to face with the weight of their situation. You want that situation to feel just so important, so almost mind-blowingly hard at times, but also so desperately worth it that they're going to make the sacrifice. They're going to find a way to succeed through every battle, through every challenge, through every stressful moment of their lives. They're going to find a way, or they're going to die trying. That's, I think, an important distinction to make with these scenes of mounting action, is that they don't all have to be action scenes. Some authors choose to write action scenes rather quickly, just in a couple sentences of the action that takes place. Other authors, such as myself, will often spend more time on battles to give a more in-depth look at the entire approach to a battle, so that the emotional stakes afterward feel like they've been earned so much more because of the knowledge of that struggle. Nevertheless, whatever style you choose to write, this mounting action, as it includes different character piece moments that show them to be fully 3D and fleshed out, builds into that struggle. Because when you get to that final moment, you want to feel like it took a war to get there. And when they finally claim the victory, if in your story, as most do, they tend to claim the victory, even if many things are lost in the process, then you want that to feel like it was earned, not cheaply just thrown in. And this is something I've even learned and grown upon as my books have progressed. And I feel like I've gotten much better at this in my more recent novels as I've learned how to portray that so much more deeply. So then, in your climax, you come to the point of no turning back. Do not forget the characters you've built up and the way you've been building these characters and how much this moment means for them. If they do not do this, how much will be lost? That is a great question to ask. How much will the characters lose if they don't do this? If they don't take it to that final conclusion? And then you have the one defining moment. A single event, even if it's within a series of events, that will last the characters' whole lives, and this battle will change everything. They might not realize necessarily it's the battle to change everything, though often a character will. Often a character will notice there's no turning back from this point. And then when it's finally won, when you finally have that massive test of character and they persevere through it, you can transition and head into the resolution. So let's talk also about some goals that you should have for the climax. You want to have powerful tests of character. Tests of will, tests of emotions, tests of endurance, tests of even the goodness of your characters, ways that they could cop out, or ways that they could take an easy shortcut and choose not to. Don't want to let these moments go to waste, because even as they reveal the good attributes and elements and the bad attributes and elements of your characters, of the protagonist and the antagonist, you can then work this into their character arcs as they progress and make changes to themselves and to others for the better or for the worse. You also want unforgettable moments, especially in this climax. The entire book should be full of unforgettable moments, but especially here at the climax, you have interesting, very often unique situations thrown at the characters like maybe no other characters in all of fiction have ever faced before. Or if they are very relatable struggles and instances, maybe the character takes a unique perspective on them or a unique light on them. Or if it's a tried and true, very average and normal situation that a lot of people face, play on that emotion, play on that relatability to the reader, and play on why it's so important the way your character reacts as he or she does. The next thing you want to do is you want to have the last straw broken, or the greatest challenge. The greatest challenge you can think of that ties up a lot of plot holes, ties up a lot of loose ends, has direct input into the themes that you've built. And then this challenge shows why it was so important ultimately that this book was read. You then also, in the tying up of this climax, even if there's going to be other minor skirmishes to come or minor emotional events to come, because after the climax it doesn't have to end immediately, it doesn't all have to automatically get tied up nicely, but you want to lead for or head some type of foundation for a final moment of closure. This closure eventually will come, and we'll talk more in the resolution how there's going to be events that need to lead up to the closure. Often a book won't have a climax and then an immediate ending, although some do, especially in a series. But the resolution then, especially if this is the only book or the last book in the novel, has developing moments that will then tie it up into a final ending. And your climax, you should already have in mind when you're writing it how that ending will eventually come. So thank you guys so much for listening to the video. I hope that you're really starting to think through different aspects and elements you need to have in the middle of your story, in the mounting action and climactic moment that set the stage for all of the payoffs to the things you built at the start of the book. I hope you guys like this video. Comment below and consider subscribing to hear more content like this. And thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this video. Let me know if there's any ways I can be improving these or different topics you want to hear about in the world of stories, books, and creative writing. So thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you love the video. God bless.